Mm.
Howdy and welcome to GM's Toolkit. I'm your host Marat. Joining me today are Toby and Kris. Say hi, guys.
No.
Great. Okay. Okay, I got half of what I asked for. That's twice as much as I expected.
You see, you introduced us at the same time. It's not like we're a fixed item here. I mean, we're separate entities, Marat. We need
No, you two are a package deal.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. No.
Okay. So,
what are we talking about? Why are we even here?
Yes.
Oh, it's just so I could distract you from all the stuff I'm going to have going on in your homes in the background. But
this is fine.
In the meantime,
going out the window.
In the meantime, today's episode is about Vancian Magic and D&D and alternatives to Vancian Magic, so that we can give people who play D&D or D&D-esque games, D20 games, some alternatives to Vancian Magic. You don't have to raise your hand like I'm not a school teacher.
Right, okay, so for those playing at home, what the hell is Vancian Magic?
Right. Okay, so Vancian Magic is the traditional fire and forget system of spells that has been used in D&D. I think it's called Vancian Magic because it's based on a system of magic by an author named Jack Vance back in the day when...
This is where the magic user walks in, goes, magic missile, and then goes, ha! Thanks guys, catch you tomorrow. Same time? Right.
Yeah. Like, I only have 2 spell slots today, and they've got magic missile and...
Right. Versus the World of Warcraft system where I have a bunch of spells and mana.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is where you don't have cooldowns, you don't have mana pools, you have X number of slots of spells. You fill them, you can cast a spell from each slot once that day.
Vancian Magic until you...
Oh, okay, yeah. So Gygax and Anson back in the dark mists of time of like the 70s or 80s, when they were developing this...
Wasn't that dark? It was very neon, actually. The 80s were very pink flamingos and neon. Wasn't that dark, actually?
Shortly after the invention of fire.
Wow. Rough.
When Gygax and Anson
wheels, damn you.
When they were developing their magic, they were big fans or they were just aware of a series of books by an author, Jack Vance, where the magic system was essentially what it is in most versions of D&D, which is that fill a spell slot, cast a spell, now that slot is empty and you can't cast any spells out of it until you rest and re-memorize it, which is why it's referred to as Vancian Magic.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, he's got his pen. Shit just got serious.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to talk about...
alternatives to Vancian Magic.
Right, and that's what's going in the GM's toolkit.
Yes.
That's the takeaway. So you're a GM here and you're like, this version of magic may not suit my needs, ergo I'm going to do this. Okay, cool. I'm on board. This sounds good.
It's alternatives to that fire and forget magic system where your wizard has 5-minute days where for 5 minutes they've got a ton of magic and then, like they're a D4 fighter with a stick.
This is why we have cantrips and artisans, right?
And a crossbow.
Yes,
and a crossbow.
Yeah, the crossbow.
Damn straight. I'm a wizard. You got no spells. What you going to do? I'm going to put this through your head.
No. Once again, interestingly, cantrips and orisons being at will casts only came in at like Pathfinder and thereafter. So before that, say 3.5, the best system, and all D&D before that, your level 0 spells, which were your cantrips and orisons, still had slots, and you'd still run out of
players raging right now. All 2 of them are raging right now.
Hey, there are at least 3 of us, and
who plays ADD 2nd edition and still be like, nope, damn you, Thaco was the height of roleplay.
Yeah, Thaco was the height of roleplay.
Do I hit? Let me get my scientific calculator to find out.
Yep. There was the break doors and lift bars, bars and lift gates roll. Yeah. That's the height of role playing.
So I think it was when you had like strength 18 or whatever, you had that percentile after it.
Yeah,
the
then you had
first one was 1800.
Excellent. We were like 4 minutes in, not even 5 minutes in, total derail into fighters and strength. Fantastic.
Absolutely. So
that's about a quarter of a Henderson right there.
Yeah. Okay. So
I must warn you that most of the, like, I'll be mentioning some alternatives that have actually been published within D&D and some interesting third-party material that I found.
Okay.
But most of them don't fix the issue with linear fighters and quadratic wizards. If anything, most of them make spellcasters more powerful, but in different ways that could work better or worse for your campaigns. And there are some that do try to balance it out.
Okay. Lay it on me.
Okay, so a really common house rule that I see, especially since psionics became like a big thing in around 3rd edition, was taking the psionics version of having a mana pool, essentially power points and levels, and just allowing you to spend your points on whatever levels of spells you could cast, and higher level spells would cost more points. And that way you avoid the issue where you have a powerful wizard who can cast like these 3 world-shattering 9th level spells, and they've like created pocket dimensions and torn up time, and then they're like, I'm out of those.
Fun.
Yeah, but then like I'm out of those. But I have like 17 8th level spells like that are almost as powerful, just still ready to go. I'm just totally fine. And then like the 7th and 6th, and so in Vancian Magic, casting really powerful, exhausting magic doesn't make you less able to cast slightly weaker magic, which the PowerPoint pool thing in psionics gets around, where if you spend all your power points on the really big powerful spells, you just may not have enough power points to then cast
we're
the
playing in a
levels.
system where if you have 1 hit point, you're 100% combat effective. You lose 1 hit point and you're dead or unconscious. So I mean, we're not dealing in shades of grey here. I mean, we're pretty black and white, aren't we?
That's fair.
You know?
The reason I bring this house rule up first is that it's actually not a house rule. Like, people think it's a house rule because there aren't that many people anymore who play like 2nd edition, for example, and in
all 3 of them like, wait
The reason why people didn't play 2nd edition.
yeah. There are 2
we're down to
people
one
who are going to be
viewer.
watching this show who be like, well, actually. So in the last 2nd edition game that I played was in the pre-Fall of Magic Netheril setting, wherein Magic did explicitly work that way. You had arcs, which were your power points, and weave, which was the spell level or how deep into the weave of magic you could cast. So using the pseudo psionics PowerPoint system has actually been a non-third party explicitly in the rules of D&D at least since Netheril in 2nd edition. I'll admit I've not played 1st or any of the permutations thereof, so I don't know if it showed up there.
I started with basic, man. Come on, Beckme was where it was at. So I mean, in terms of core sets, we've always had this system.
In
4th
terms of
edition did change it a bit.
It did. No, you're right. Yeah, 4th.
5th, actually, I was going to get to that later.
Because 4th was all like, had all those, unlimited, then per combat, per day.
Yeah, what we
and
tend
then spells were those rituals or whatever.
Yeah, they sort of divided it into 2 different parts.
Who honestly thinks that Tensor's floating disc isn't a combat spell? I bang that thing into everybody.
Yeah. But
Hey,
Turn that thing sideways, use it as a shield, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I've used it in combat like a lot. You cast it behind someone, push them over it.
Yeah, like there's all sorts of uses for it. It's good. It's a combat spell.
It's good. Tensor's floating disc is definitely a combat spell. That said, 4th edition did mix it up with the having per day, per encounter, at will abilities.
And I remember that didn't go well in that one game where a certain person decided that they could chisel a hole through a wall using an at-will magic missile.
Yeah.
How many hit points does this wall have? 600. Right, I could do like 4 damage per 6 seconds, do the math. I'm like, cool, 3 hours later, there's a hole in the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah. What an interesting I noticed about the 4E overhaul of how Magic worked was that more than anything else, it has actually counteracted the linear fighters, quadratic wizards model of Magic in D&D.
Can I say, as an old person who is
old,
that I hate that. The fact that you can go, I am any class, rogue, whatever, and go, haha, heal myself, cleric's redundant, just made me. That was probably one of the biggest things that made me walk away.
Yeah,
because I'm like, I mean, you can hate me all you want. You can be like, that guy doesn't know shit. That's fine, but I just that to me was like you made a whole class, a whole core mechanic redundant. Hated it. Yeah. Anyway, back into it.
Whatever my personal thoughts on the content of the new ability system was, the way it was set out, aside from the fact that I think they over-homogenized how every class's mechanics worked, what they did manage to do was now your fighter or your rogue has as many special abilities as often as the wizard does. They weren't necessarily as powerful, and the ranger suddenly became a tier 1 class because, sure. But what they did do was, in homogenizing how classes worked, they also leveled the playing field a lot between casters and non-casters in terms of how often could you do a cool thing. So, spellcasters no longer had 5-minute days, but they also no longer had spell slots for hours when your fighter had nothing to do, but I hit it with my sword maybe twice if I'm lucky.
Sure.
So that was an interesting design decision, which lots of people hated.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally biased. I think Paizo did a pretty good job in balancing things out, and it's not a perfect system. I think they nuked bards a bit.
Yes.
And there's a few other things, but I mean, at high levels, or at low levels, you've got casters that have their orisons, they have their cantrips, they have their at-wills, which is cool. So they're not just going magic missile done. And your fighters are obviously in there kicking ass, but they gave all the fighters those extra feats and whatever have you, so that by the time you got to end level, sure, the wizard's going, die, and everything falls over. But then the fighters just like, whirlwind, triple jump, grand slam, whatever have you, a multi-cleave, destruction, just as efficiently. Like, they're not redundant, but I mean, yeah. So, so for the sake of a toolkit, okay, I'm playing, and I know you're getting to 5th edition, I suppose, but let's say I'm not playing 5th edition. Let's say I'm playing Pathfinder. What have you got for me to put in my toolkit, Marat, that allows me to get around, the traditional slots per day?
Actually, that's a really good question. I was wondering if maybe we should actually break it up by edition of what are the options for this? What are the options for that? Okay.
I mean, so starting with basic.
Well, starting with basic, your options are move to a better system.
User has been banned for this video. Have you played basic at all? Have you, like, honestly, like, not having a dig? It's okay. It's like, it's super simple. Like, it is super simple, but at the same time, because the rules are so decluttered, I found you can have some really deep RP experiences because you're just not worrying about certain mechanics so much. But anyway, I mean, it's the same system. Magic's the same thing, and it was even more. It was even worse because you had no cantrips and none of that sort of stuff. You literally had level 1, 4 hit points, and a magic missile. That was it. And yeah, sure, by the time you got to level 20 or 30, you were a god.
Well, you can thank Tim Kask for your magic missile even being useful. Because Gary Gygax hated even the concept of magic users. His ideal hero was Conan the Barbarian.
This is fine.
Which is fine. But everything that sucks about magic users, especially in the early versions, was because Gary Gygax didn't give much of a shit about them. And Tim Kask eventually managed to convince him to at least allow Magic Missile to auto-hit, so that the one thing your wizard could do per day would at least work.
I guess it kind of makes sense. When they're coming out of chainmail and they're coming out of miniature wargaming, where a wizard in a miniature wargaming, even today, like, you know, I've not played a lot of Warhammer, but I mean, I've seen wizards do massive damage on battlefields in fantasy battles. Yeah.
Wipe out entire regiments of people at a single time with a single spell.
Because that moved into chainmail, moved into D&D, I can understand perhaps why he would be hesitant to make wizards too powerful, because of the whole, you know. Because the other thing is too, like, if you're gonna put an AK on the street, the good guys might get it, but the bad guys might get it too. And if you're gonna have wizards with powerful spells, those enemies are gonna use those spells against you. So again, I'm sure Gygax was thinking, okay, my heroes run into the tower and they get hit by a lightning bolt, they're all dead. So like balancing has to sort of go more than one direction, but yeah,
it does.
Okay.
So I don't know what actual published variants of Vancian Magic are available for basic and old first stuff. I'm afraid I don't have any personal experience with that. I was hoping that someone old like yourself might.
I mean, I'd played old systems that had like there was the Unhallowed Earth series for basic D&D, which had you know, the world inside of the Earth with the sun in the center, and that had a lot of forgotten worlds like dinosaurs and all that. But one of them was like an Egyptian setting, and it was extremely high magic. It was an interesting world to play. Every class had these sort of cantrips, and it was the first time I'd sort of seen these things that were things like prestidigitation. Where it would do your hair, it would do your makeup, it would do, you know, it would wick sweat away, like practical spells that even peasants had access to. It was an interesting thing. I mean, there wasn't a lot of room for exploitation, but it existed. So
you're just not exploiting hard enough.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah. So we get the entire city to do that at an ocean, right? But like for me, that was the first time I had seen cantrips and spells that were just sort of unlimited per se. So the ideas were definitely there, but I didn't see. I mean, I still use, you know, slot-based magic today.
Yeah, because whatever the variance of it throughout the systems, that's always been the core thing. But so for GMs who are playing basic and early editions, here's your new tool for your toolkit. Toby, what was that setting called again?
Yeah, I mean, well, I would probably I mean, and I'm sure someone's done the work already. I would just consider, even if you're a mad keen player of basic or AD&D first, but you want to give your low levels some more power, I would just move orisons and cantrips out of Pathfinder, maybe tweak the damage slightly down, because Pathfinder's, you know, a little bit, instead of being 1d3, like make it 1d2 or something like that on your cantrip, 1d1, whatever, but just dial it back a little bit. I would just move those spells straight in, because they'll fit pretty well and they're reasonably well balanced. I don't think there's anything to, or if you're really concerned about, just remove the damage ones, like, and just do, because all those cantrips and orisons are really mostly almost RP sort of spells, like the Detect Magic, and this is like, why is Detect Magic originally a slot per day spell? That's ridiculous. I am infused with magic, I live magic, I'm all about magic, I read books about magic, I'm level 1, Detect Magic, I'm done, guys. Like, shouldn't I be able to go, haha, after years of study I can tell you this thing is magic? So that makes more sense. I would probably just bring those orisons and cantrips from current stuff backwards, and I imagine that's what people are doing already.
Probably, very much. Probably, yeah.
Because it fits in with the slot system very, very easily. Like, minimum amount of work required to put them in.
So, Chris, thoughts on variants for magic use in early D&D before we move on to, like, second?
Well, I've not really had much experience with any of the early editions. I really started with second edition and went up from there, so I can't really say much about the early ones because I don't know them.
Oh, jump to second.
Okay. So as I mentioned before, for second, because second also had the, you know, spell slots as its main thing, and I think in second they started bringing in psionics, but you had to roll to see if your character happened to be psionic, and if you were.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Like it wasn't a thing you could build into. It was a thing you lucked into, and it didn't seem to have a lot of consistency. It was certainly developed more in later editions that we'll get to. But for my contribution to the toolkits of DMs who are playing second is look into the Netheril setting. So I think that, Magic of Netheril, which I think is either Magic of Netheril or one of the Netheril named books, which had this arcs and weaves magic system, which was spell points versus spell levels and how many points each level cost to cast. So it gave you a mana pool that you could distribute as you saw fit. Which did away with I only prepared, magic missile once today, and we could really deal with it a second time. Or, I didn't prepare any combat spells at all today because we're literally just at the library, and now we need a fireball, and that's a little awkward. So the arcs and weaves.
Now the library's on fire. Nice. What up, Marat?
Now the library is on fire, and it wasn't my fault because your character is Harry Dresden. So the arcs and weaves system is what it's called. It's in one of the Netheril books, because I know that a lot
we'll
of
find it and put a link in the.
We will put links to all the things we discuss in the thing.
Because we're like that.
We are excellent. So I know that a lot of people don't like using third-party stuff and are really leery of it, and don't like using homebrew because that's like walking through a minefield of awful things looking for the occasional gem. So if you're the kind of GM who steers away from homebrew and third-party just to not have to deal with manually going through everything, looking for something that's good, the Arcs and Weave system in the Netheril setting for 2nd edition is official published D&D stuff, and it gives you an alternative to that Vancian Magic that I think is a lot of fun to play with, especially in that very Lord of the Rings feeling vibe that the early edition had.
Very high magic.
It was very high magic.
Yeah, and high. I think high fantasy is the phrase, isn't it? High fantasy, and because then the opposite of that is like your Conan, Iron Age, low fantasy. Yeah.
Yeah. But the other thing I found about it was, even in high magic in later editions, magic feels commonplace in high fantasy systems.
Look at Eberron and stuff, places like that in 3rd ed. Like the whole world is just
it's magic
buildings
and
are floating
technology.
Full magic all of the time.
Yes, my Warforged wizard. He's OP as heck because he queues like he can repair himself. Oh, that was hilarious days. Anyway.
Yeah, no, it was great. But I found that 2nd edition did a really good job of merging high magic with the feel that magic is still weird and special, rather than everyone and their dog has like 3rd level spells.
Yeah.
So the Arcs and Weave system is what I would give, or what I would direct GMs looking to expand their 2nd edition Magic Toolkit tools. Kris, Toby, anything you want to add? Anything else you've come across?
I went from me straight over to 3rd. And then 6 months later went 3.5 and went, thanks for letting me waste all my money. Bye. Like a lot of us did.
Yeah. Okay. Your options for 3rd edition are a little bit more varied. If you've played an MMO of any sort before, you'll be familiar with the concept of a recharge system. So in recharge systems, rather than having a limited number of spell slots, you have spells that have a cooldown measured in rounds or minutes or what have you, and as your spellcaster levels, what were their higher level spells become their lower level spells, and they get a shorter cooldown. So the weaker the spells are for you, the sooner you can cast them again. So rather than having level 1 spells all take this long to cool down, and level 2 spells all take this long, it's your highest spell level spells take this long, and your 2nd highest take this long, and your 3rd highest take this long. So what that does is
infinite casts. Then it's just limited by cooldown.
Yes.
Okay.
You have infinite casts of your spells, limited by how often they cool down for you to be able to cast them. So because you essentially get limited casts that can it does, relatively speaking, power up your spellcasters to others, but it also means your spellcasters can't nova all their highest level spells in the span of a few rounds and completely dominate everything for that combat, and then they... So that's the first new tool that I would recommend at least looking at. It might not be the kind of thing you're looking for, but it is very different from Vancian Magic, and it's actually on the SRD, the system reference document for 3.5, in the variant campaign. No, Variant Magic has its own section on the D20 SRD, and it is in there. So as you level, I like how it reflects that as you become a more powerful spellcaster, low-level spells would be less effort for you, and you can cast them more often, as your high-level spells then take up the higher cooldown times.
I could have used the heck out of that.
Yeah, everyone could abuse the heck out of that. Like, I had a player who tried to slip that in for his character without asking me, and I was like, what are you doing, dude? That's a campaign rule. That's not like...
So looking at, like, say, the mana-based system that we mentioned earlier, and then now this system, while they have advantages in giving spellcasters, obviously, access to a lot more spells per day and whatever have you, they do create a lot more paperwork, though, if you think of that. Like, if I've got a spell per day, have I cast it? Done. Right? If I've got mana, then I need to continuously keep track of how much mana. If I've got spells with cooldowns, then I'm obviously going to have to keep track of each spell and how long it's got to cooldown. I mean, I guess as long as you're prepared to keep... But I mean, as a DM, if I was allowing players to do that, I mean, I'm a stickler DM, so people hate playing with me because I'll be like, did you fire an arrow? Yeah, just cross that right off. Thanks, you have 99. But an arrow's worth like
that's great.
A sliver of a copper. Don't care, cross it off, because when you get down to 10, you're going to be really panicking, So, but anyway, I think as a GM though, you would need to really keep on top of the players and make sure that they're keeping an accurate track of whatever alternate system you're using. Because I can see that creating problems otherwise. Because I do. I mean, I have a lot of players, even in the group I'm in now, where no one crosses off an arrow. And over the course of it, like, the thing is that could create a problem later. And if I know that especially if you had mana, like if you had spell points, for instance, I know a lot of players that would just be like, it's only level 1. Just not gonna bother. Yeah. It would really happen, and of course, then it has a big impact later on when you have a large fight, and they've now got all these extra spell points that they shouldn't have.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's just something that sprang to my mind. It's cool to have alternatives, but so far every one of them has a higher degree of maintenance. And as a GM, I would just say make sure you keep an eye on it. Or if you're playing with players who are the sort that aren't going to cross off a ration or an arrow, maybe then don't play the alternatives.
Yeah, well, you got two different types of people who'll do this sort of thing. People who just don't concentrate on it and don't think about it. They're not doing it intentionally.
No. I'm not saying it's malicious. It's just complacent.
But there are people who would abuse it maliciously. Who would, what we call munchkin players. Who would most definitely go, the GM's not paying attention, I'll cast a spell, I won't cross this off, or whatever. There are absolutely people who would take advantage of it maliciously.
I haven't met many of them, thankfully.
No, they're not necessarily common, but they do.
I think I've only ever played with one of those kind of players, and I've played with a lot of different people. So I think there are two.
Going to be the biggest enemy in that regard.
There are two different aspects to that. One is the bookkeeping, and the other one is making sure everyone's on board with how it's supposed to work. I don't think the bookkeeping would be too much of an issue, because spellcasters have always had a notably higher level of bookkeeping that you have to do than non-spellcasters. All your spells known, your spells prepared, how many times you can cast X level spells, or how many slots you have. People who play spellcasters are going in, unless they're brand new to playing role-playing games. Unless they're brand new to playing role-playing games, they'll go in generally with the understanding that playing a spellcaster brings some increased level of bookkeeping to keep all your spells organized.
On the subject, so what material am I looking at for 3.5 specifically?
Specifically, super derailing.
Back on topic.
To bring this all back on topic, so Recharge Magic is on the SRD. There are also things called Incantations on the SRD, also on the Variant Magic system. Incantations are a form of skill-based magic that anyone can do. There are lots of third-party skill-based magic systems. There's True Sorcery as part of the Black Company line that also, by Green Ronin, right, that also does it, and that I'd also recommend looking into, where rather than having spell slots, you have your skills like spellcraft, and to cast a spell, you have to hit a certain skill check to understand how to wrap the matter of magic into whatever it is you desire. Or in incantations, a lot of them are religious based, like your cultists chanting to summon demons or something, or open a small portal into hell and actually let the fire. Yeah. Or what this does is it's kind of like rituals in 4th edition. They kind of shifted in the same direction. Right. I think the rituals were still limited mostly to casters, but you could get access to them with the ritual caster feat. So it's more that rather than spells being locked to only casters and only in a certain way, skill-based casting systems gives everyone the potential to access magic in a different way. The incantations...
And these are compatible with Pathfinder as well, then I imagine, if they're 3.0, 3.5.
Absolutely. Like in fact, I think Pathfinder has their own version of it as well. Okay. And I mean, the compatibility document for going 3.5 to Pathfinder is 2 pages long. Like, they're basically the same system with some quality of life patches. So Incantations is on the D20 SRD. True Sorcery is by Green Ronin. You can Google it. And they're both good examples of skill-based magic, where rather than having the Vancian Magic, you have to achieve...
So it completely replaces, you don't run both at once? Okay.
Well, you could run both at once.
But it would be silly to do so.
But it would be a little bit silly to do so, because, for example, the incantation system that has been published for 3.5 is quite limited. It's a framework and then about a dozen example rituals. So I would, if you were going to use incantations, I'd probably replace regular magic with it. But then what would happen is that you would need to convert or just make a whole bunch of new spells. I'd be more likely to port in something like Green Ronin's True Sorcery, because in addition to redescribing how the magic system works by making it based off, I think, spellcraft checks, and it has like backlash as you try to control magic by being skilled at it rather than going, I have magic.
So how does that limit spells per day and such, though? I mean, is it, again, it's sort of...
As in the True Sorcery method, I think as you cast spells and even as you succeed, there's a backlash, or there's like a fatigue mechanic specifically to do with spell casting. Right. It doesn't prevent you from casting spells, but it gives you stacking penalties.
Right. Okay. So it just gets harder and harder as you get more.
It gets harder and harder, and I think I may be mixing up the two systems. I may be mixing up the
Don't
the
listen,
two.
Marat. Click the link. Read for yourself.
Click the link. There will be links. But if you fail, I know that in the incantation system for 3.5, if you fail your checks, and these rituals are usually a series of knowledge checks, you might have to make like a knowledge arcana, and a knowledge religion, and spellcraft. And if you fail overall, there's backlash in terms of damage or stat damage, or like for the really powerful ones, like, well, everyone dies. You know, because you're all tied into this unstable nexus of energy, and it just pulls your souls right out.
I actually have a fantastic alternate magic system for 4th edition.
Fantastic. Tell us about that. Well, just...
Play anything else. Done.
That's where that works.
Fuck my logic.
But I have actually been thinking about an alternate magic system myself that can be used with any edition, really, because you completely, once again, remove all the existing magic and replace it with this one I've been working on. It's based on a combination of the way that Psionics works in Dark Heresy, the 40k.
I do love some Dark Heresy.
And mixing that with a book I had years ago, an AD&D book called Wild Magic. So the theory is you get rid of all spellcaster classes and just have everything else, but anybody can access the magic. But anytime they cast any sort of spell, it'll have a wild magic effect on it. So there's a table, 1d100 table. Whenever you cast something, you roll on that 1d100 table for additional effects. And this can be anything as crazy as like plants grow out of the ground, or the words that you say to cast the spell come out in bubbles and you have to pop the bubbles to actually release the words and things like that. There can be any number of different crazy effects. So anybody can cast magic, but there's going to be some sort of ramification to that cast. It's not going to be nearly as bad as what can happen with Psionics in Dark Heresy, because you can have crazy
I do love rolling me some
because you could be losing the battle and you're like, well, you know what? Screw it. Magic, magic, magic. Ah.
Yeah,
you run the risk. It's like, well, we're going to lose anyway.
Well, I mean, in Dark Heresy, you're like, I'm going to do this basic Psionic thing, but you get a really couple of bad rolls, and then a demon crawls out of your forehead.
To be fair, Dark Heresy, I missed the step. I fell 3 centimeters. I take lethal damage.
Yep, but that's so, you know, Dark Heresy is really brutal in that respect. Yes.
Yeah. To the point that everyone in the party was wearing jetpacks when they went downstairs.
Yes, absolutely.
Falling, fire damage, and magic are amazingly lethal in Dark Heresy. I love it.
Yeah. But it's just that random
my cigarette. Dead. Seems legit.
Yeah, but that random effect of having to roll on tables to see what additional things can happen whenever you cast a spell. That's what I was sort of going for.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And it was just an interesting way of doing it. So everybody can cast, but who knows what's going to happen.
Well, I mean, with all those negatives, you probably wouldn't have a lot of people that would be purely dedicated to magic, because they're not alive anymore.
That's why I said
it would be too risky. You'd have like thrill seekers, I guess, perhaps, that would sort of... But if it's that wild and unpredictable, then
Well, that's why I said there wouldn't be dedicated classes like wizards or sorcerers or anything. It would just be like all the other martial classes and things like that. There would be clerics, but they would be a bit different. They would, because they use divine magic, so they'd have the healing stuff, but all the rest of the sort of thing perhaps would be a bit different. It's still something I'm working on. It's just an idea. It's just an idea I'm going with at the moment.
Yeah,
and it is essentially not dissimilar to the True Sorcery and the Incantation alternatives, where there are, if for successfully casting the spell is difficult, and failing to cast the spell carries repercussions, which replacing Vancian Magic in your system also stops. It avoids replacing it with an equally spammable mechanic. Like, if there is serious risk to your spellcasting, actually, in terms of serious risk to spellcasting, there's a fantastic little world setting called Carpathium. There'll be a link in the thing. It's on someone's blog, and aside from some really, really interesting city building mechanics that they've made that I actually use in my games, because they have like table-based creation of cities and relationships between NPCs in those cities that can get very dense and very interesting. They have a system for their magic where you essentially have that pool of spell points, but when you run out of them, you can keep trying to cast spells. That pool of points you have is how much magic you can safely channel. And once that runs out, you can still cast, but it could have very serious negative repercussions, and the writing is just lovely. It's very, very kind of gothic horror sort of stuff, and my camera's gone blurry.
That's all right. You looked beautiful for a moment. Just a moment.
Just that one beautiful moment in time. So it's 3.5 compatible. It's a D20 system, and what it does is it splits your casting into safe casting, and you can still go for it if you're desperate.
Okay.
And having, like the wild magic, is a roll that you would make to avoid negative side effects or to avoid losing control of the magic. It's like Dark Heresy and D&D had a baby, and that baby hates you.
That reminds me sort of the Discord series of books by Terry Pratchett, where their magic users always run the risk of tearing a hole into the dungeon dimensions and have something crawl out that's 1/3 octopus, 1/3 insect, and 1/3 bicycle.
Yeah, which is basically how Dark Heresy works.
Yeah.
So I cast like a light spell because it's dark in here. Oh, look, demons. I made the demons happen again. It's like the third time this week.
So do you have anything for 4th edition beyond what I had?
Thank you, Toby, for making me think for a moment that you were going to contribute.
I did. I helped. Go by 5th or Pathfinder. Get on with it.
Well, I mean, the thing about 4th edition is that it already is an alternative to Vancian Magic.
Ooh, could we bring Vancian Magic into 4th edition?
You could.
Why would you? Is a better question. But, okay, so Magic for 5th edition then. Is there anything specific that you have?
5th edition is also already a variant of Vancian Magic, which was also interesting one to discuss. So in, say, earlier editions with Vancian Magic, you had certain effects that scaled based on your caster level, like how long a spell would last after you'd cast it, if it was non-instantaneous, how many dice of damage these would be like per caster level, and so on. 5th edition has largely done away with that aspect, and instead spells, generally their description will describe additional effects or additional damage or additional duration if you cast them in higher level slots. So what that's done is it's still kind of a pseudo-Vancian thing. You still have limited slots of X levels, but what you can put in those slots is more meaningful. Because in 3.5, you can cast a lower level spell in a higher level slot, but it doesn't do anything unless you're using the heightened meta magic, and it's essentially wasted unless you have one spell that your whole build is based around that you just need to get more of for that day. And it wasn't a widely used feature, and it still isn't, because it doesn't really do much. Whereas in 5th edition, many, if not most, spells that you learn have progressively increasing effects when you use certain level slots for them.
So instead of being, Magic Missile, where it's like, every 2 levels you get another bolt, in 5th, it's just, if you cast it at level 1, you get a bolt. If you put it in level 2, you get 2, 3, you get 3, or whatever like that. Is that
something like
that? Because a lot of the spells in classic D&D already have that. The higher level you are, the more you get. So I guess we've removed that and then just put it in the appropriate slot to get more benefit.
Yeah, I don't believe that it's the same kind of scaling across the board for every spell. I do know that many of the spells that I've looked at, in the spell description, they'll actually say, like, it's a first level, like a light bolt that the cleric gets. It does like 1d8 radiant damage, and I think gives the next ally to attack that target advantage because they've basically been glitter dusted. And it will say, like, if you cast this in a 3rd level spell slot, it does X amount of damage and has X effect. If you cast it in like a 6th level slot, it does this. So it doesn't do anything extra if you cast it in a 2nd level slot.
Right.
But many spells have higher versions of that spell explicitly in the spell description,
right,
if you use higher level slots for them.
Right.
And so, while it doesn't replace Vancian Magic, it makes Vancian Magic more versatile. And a lot of people may not necessarily be looking to do away with Vancian Magic totally, because it's a system that, roughly speaking, everyone is familiar with, except for people totally newly coming into the hobby. And even people who've never played before may have, by osmosis, absorbed some of the concepts related to D&D because they've been in geek culture for decades now. So while many people may not want to do away completely with Vancian Magic, they might want Vancian Magic that is a little different and a little more versatile and can do a little bit different stuff. And I think the 5th edition variant of Vancian Magic is a good middle ground for that, because it doesn't do away with Vancian Magic totally and leave you having to port in an entirely new magic system or make up a whole new spell list, or some of the other really lots of extra bookwork for the DM, like the Incantations in 3.5 might do, because there are only a few examples thereof. But what it does is make the system a little bit more flexible while being familiar enough that everyone could just pick it up and go, oh yeah, cool. It's basically like all the concept of meta magic from 3.5. A lot of it has just been rolled into the core casting system in 5e. So rather than having to get meta magic feat and apply it to spell slots and things, like meta magics are still a thing in 5e. But some of the meta magic effects, like Heighten, are just innately part of the system in the spells themselves. So it gives you a little bit more versatility while being 90% still what you're familiar enough with to hit the ground running.
Yeah. All right, wrap it up for me, Marat. Give me some conclusions.
Right. Okay, so in conclusion, let's go from top. For basic, we had
bring the cantrips and arsons in.
We had bring the cantrips and arsons in. We had that pseudo-Egyptian setting with all of the. We'll try to find a link for that, so that if you're playing basic, there's some alternate magic stuff to look at. The 2nd edition, have a look at the Netheril, the pre-Fall of Magic Netheril setting, where you had up to 12th level spells. Actually, technically up to 11. There's only ever been one 12th level spell, and that did not go well for anyone. So the Netheril setting, Arcs and Weaves, works very much like Psionics and Spell Points. In 2nd edition, if you want to shake up your casting there. 3rd edition, you've got Incantations, you have the Recharge mechanic. There is actually also an official 3rd edition, essentially the spell point system, like PowerPoints for Psionics, is also actually on the SRD as a variant magic system. It works basically the same way. So there are lots of Vancian variants, alternatives in 3rd and in Pathfinder. So Words of Power as well are in there, where you combine words, but that is exponentially more bookkeeping. 4th edition is natively.
Yes.
4th edition is natively an alternate to Vancian casting. Yep. And whether or not you're a fan of 4th edition as a whole, take a look at specifically the way that casting and the per day, per encounter, at will, and ritual spells work. Because that taken on its own could work really interestingly if you port it across to another system. It's not that hard to adapt, and because it is still a D&D product, a lot of the same spells that we all are used to and know how they work are still in there. You don't have to make up your own content when you port the system across. 5th edition, again, is innately a Vancian variant, wherein you have some aspect of meta magic that is now part of the core system, where you use different spell slots for those spells, which, if you're looking at moving away from traditional Vancian magic, but not so far that you'd essentially have to learn a whole new system, I think the 5e magic system is a good halfway house to stop at and go, is this the kind of thing I was looking for, or is it not different enough? It's a really good marker to tell, to get a feel of how far away you're trying to move from Vancian magic. Like, because I think lots of people could be satisfied with that amount of variation, and the ones that won't will look at that and go, no, I understand that now I need specifically more than this level of variation. So if you're looking for a totally varied thing, such as skill-based casting, then you look at stuff like True Sorcery by Green Ronin. Have a look at the Words of Power and Incantations for Pathfinder and 3.5 that are completely. Words of Power is still a little bit like Vancian, but Incantations and skill-based stuff like True Sorcery are completely different from Vancian Magic. So if you get to the 5e system and you go, that's not different and fresh enough, that's where I would suggest you go next. It'll be more work to integrate them into your game, but they will certainly freshen up the magic in your world. You may not be prepared for some of the meta effects, like how that makes your different classes interact and things that opens up in the world, especially for Incantations. Now that you can have any random group of commoner cultists in a basement accidentally open a door to hell and let like hellfire out into the city, that certainly introduces a whole new relationship between magic and your world that wasn't necessarily there in traditional Vancian Magic. The gates that divide power are totally shifted. So you might need to spend some time getting a feel of how that rebalances your entire world. But if you're looking for something totally different, skill-based magics like Incantations and True Sorcery are what I'd look at next.
Cool. Alright, so people are going to have your own thoughts. Let's hear them in the comments. If you've also got a topic of discussion you'd like us to talk about, by all means let us know in the comments as well. And we'll certainly slot it into the agenda coming up. Awesome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
Like, subscribe, all that other stuff. Links will be down below. Peace.
Links will be down below. And thank you very much, Toby and Kris, for joining me.
Most welcome.
I've been your host, Marat. This is GM's Toolkit. We'll see you next time.